One. Good afternoon, everyone. It is October 21st, 2020, and I want to welcome you to a special called meeting of the Health, Hospitals, and Social Services Committee, along with Personnel Committee and the Budget and Finance Committee. Today, we are going to discuss the Bordeaux Hospital, or the long-term care facility in Bordeaux, and so a brief timeline, I guess I could give you. Prior to my service as the Health and Hospitals Chair, there were conversations with Signature in regards to extending their contract to be the operator with Bordeaux. The contract was not extended at the time. Then the operations of the contracts was set out to bid. We did not receive any bids on that contract, and as of now, we are set to close Bordeaux Hospital on January 31st of 2021. And my main goal today was to have a conversation in regards to this. One, this council, we voted of how we would work, and part of that work would be in transparency. And so one of the main goals is to have transparency with our constituents, as well as any questions that may have arisen that haven't been able to be answered, and also give us some time as council to have some discussion on this matter. And so as we begin, I'll ask you first if everyone could please mute their phones, because we have a pretty long list of attendees, or excuse me, of participants and panelists. So if everyone could just mute their phones, that would be, or their WebEx, that would be extremely helpful. And then secondly, what we're going to do today, we're going to first, I'm going to ask the mayor's office, their representative, to give us a very brief overview of where we are, how we got here, and what their plans are moving forward. I do have time for Signature Healthcare to do the same thing, but as of now, I haven't seen anyone from Signature Healthcare join. We have invited them and have had numerous conversations. I felt that it would be extremely important for Signature to be a part of this discussion, as we, as the council and the viewers that are watching, may have some questions in regard to Signature Healthcare. So hopefully they will join. They have been invited. I do want to let you all know that. So without further ado, I would ask the mayor's office to please just give us, like I said, a brief just introduction of where we are, the historic nature of this conversation as to what we're going to be doing next. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. We're using new technology here. I'm Mary Falls. I'm an advisor to the mayor, and thank you very much for having me and all of us here today to join you and talk to you about this important topic. While most of you know that the history of Bordeaux Hospital predates Mayor Cooper's administration, I want to say at the very beginning that he strongly believes that all residents of Nashville deserve high-quality health care, including the 109 residents at Nashville Community Care and Rehabilitation at Bordeaux. And I want to set forth for you what we've gleaned from our review of council resolutions, contracts, official press announcements, and so on from several previous administrations. As you all know, Nashville has struggled for years to chart a viable path for its long-term care facility in the face of a changing healthcare industry, as the Metro Council itself has recognized over the years. When Metro exited the long-term care business at Bordeaux in 2014, in accordance with Metro Council resolutions, it engaged a private partner, Signature Healthcare, to endeavor to provide higher quality of care in a more modern setting. In 2014, the council approved the sale of the Bordeaux facility and property to private developers. These private developers would build a new 120-bed facility on an undeveloped portion of the Bordeaux property and would build a second 168-bed facility on Dickerson Pike. These facilities would be sold to and operated by Signature. At the same time, Metro entered into a 2-year contract with Signature to operate the existing facility and contracted to sell to Signature 260 of the 419 skilled nursing bed licenses for operation at those 2 new facilities. The remaining bed licenses owned by Metro would be retired permanently. State legislative authorization would be required to permit the splitting and transfer of the bed license. And in its ordinance authorizing the sale of the facility, property, and bed licenses, the council made note of the following, and I'm going to quote, there were several points that the council noted: the changing landscape of the healthcare industry, an increase in the availability of long-term care services in the private sector, an increase in funding sources for long-term care services, significant challenges for governmental entities to provide the highest quality services, the nursing home industry moving away from large hospital-style facilities and moving towards smaller residential-style facilities, often located strategically to offer a continuum of care to its residents. And no other large county or municipal government in Tennessee still owns or operates nursing home facilities. As contractually contemplated, Signature did seek state approval for splitting the bed license and building new facilities, but state authorization was not obtained. In 2015, the comprehensive Bordeaux redevelopment plan was created to reflect the desires of the community as expressed in multiple community meetings. In 2016, in conformity with that redevelopment plan and in accordance with council ordinance, the council approved the extension of the lease and construction of a new nursing home facility in North Nashville to replace the Bordeaux long-term care facility. That new 120 to 160 bed nursing home would be owned and operated by Signature at an off-campus site in North Nashville. Metro also agreed again to transfer to Signature between 100 and 160 of its 419 licensed skilled nursing beds for use at that new facility. Again, Metro agreed to permanently retire the remaining bed licenses. At that time, the council also approved subsidy of $3.5 million per year for reimbursement of operating losses, which losses were not tied to the provision of indigent care. Again, there is no contractual obligation to provide indigent care at the Bordeaux facility. 2 weeks later, the council adopted legislation conveying its expectation of an improvement in the facility's 1-star quality care score from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Such improvements were not realized. And the 2016 attempt to build a new nursing home off-site also did not occur. We should acknowledge that Signature never intended to operate this large, old facility. Twice, they endeavored to purchase Metro's bed licenses and to build new facilities in North Nashville. For a variety of reasons, that license transfer did not occur and no new facilities were built. Despite that, Signature has continued its operation of the existing building for 6 years, and we are appreciative of their work. In 2017, the State Department of Health issued a suspension of admissions of new residents and a civil monetary penalty due to, quote, deficient practices and conditions which are or are likely to be detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of the residents. Those deficiencies were corrected, and the suspension of admissions was lifted after 20 days. This June, on June 30th, the 2016 agreement was due to expire. We met with Signature last winter to determine their interest in continuing to operate the facility. We discussed our obligation to undertake a request for quotation, an RFQ, and they expressed their interest in participating in the RFQ. they were helpful in working with us to secure dates in late March for potential lessees to view the facility. As a result of the pandemic, however, we were forced to cancel those site visits. We discussed with Signature the need for a 6-month emergency extension, and they were amenable to that. In mid to late April, like at many nursing homes throughout the country, the Bordeaux facility experienced an outbreak of COVID-19, infecting 49 patients and staff. In late April, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers considered the empty floors at Bordeaux for a COVID alternate care site. After an inspection, however, the facility was deemed unsuitable, and the Corps built out a 67-bed unit at Nashville General Hospital. In response to the escalating operating costs and declining patient census due to the pandemic, Signature let us know that they would not be participating in our RFQ procurement process, but that they were willing to enter into a 6-month contract extension. We understood the extreme pressure and uncertainty that they and their industry were under as a result of the pandemic. As was true in June and continues to be true now, it is an extremely challenging time to own and operate nursing homes. And the concern about legal liability arising from the pandemic is not insubstantial. In June, Signature drafted an amendment to the contract that extended their operation for up to 7 months through January 31st of 2021. Metro would bear 100% of the losses of the facility operations during the contract extension, which losses were estimated to be around $6 million on an annualized basis. Because Signature had made clear that it would not be participating in the RFQ, the amendment gave Metro 90 days from July 1st to either identify a new operator or to direct Signature to undertake the orderly discontinuation of services. In August, following procurement processes, a new tenant for the facility was in fact solicited in conformity with the Bordeaux Comprehensive Redevelopment Plan of 2015. Applicants proposing continuation of long-term nursing services were asked to demonstrate proven track records of a commitment to high-quality patient care and an ability to commit sufficient resources to that end. Metro government has been openly evaluating options at Bordeaux for many months, including outreach to council members, the healthcare subcommittee, and a September 4th community meeting to which council members also were invited to go over the terms of the RFQ and to ask questions. Unfortunately, in response to the RFQ, no bids were submitted. Of course, Metro can't force operators to bid. It can't give contracts to interested parties. The current contract was expiring, and no operator of any kind submitted a bid. Absent interested operators, and in accordance with the Signature contract, Metro was required to authorize the wind down of operations at the facility, but only upon the assurances that each patient can be appropriately transferred to an equal or better facility of his or her choosing. Signature has appropriately submitted its wind down plan to state regulatory authorities and has begun the wind down process. Patient volume has been decreasing for weeks as families were notified by Signature of the pending closure of the facility. By way of detail, we note that the facility is licensed for 419 beds. The current census is 109. Multiple floors of the facility have been vacant for years. Patients were choosing other, more modern facilities for years. All of the patients currently at the facility have health care coverage. Of those patients, 18% of the patients come from out of county and several come from out of state. A minority of the patients at the facility have a previous address with a zip code of 37218 or its contiguous zip codes. Again, there are no patients at Bordeaux without a payer source, which was the foundational reason for Metro being in the nursing home business. We are keenly aware of the difficulty this closure presents to patients and staff. We have used our very best efforts to minimize the stress on patients and staff as we undertook the RFQ process, while also conducting an open process. Mayor Cooper believes that every Nashvilleian deserves high-quality care, and he will continue his advocacy and efforts to that end. It is our fervent goal to ensure that all of the patients find comfort and high-quality care at new residences of their choosing. We hope this is helpful. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have. We're happy to answer whatever you have.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. I would like to open the floor for committee members to ask any questions. Committee members, if you have a question, please raise your hand on the WebEx. All right. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions about the request for quotations that went out. Was that a standard format that has gotten responses in the past? Is there any possibility that had it been put together differently that we might have gotten responses? Was there anything that made it especially difficult to comply with? I guess that's for the mayor's office.
Do you want us to answer that, or I think you have someone from procurement on the...
Yeah, procurement. Mr. Taylor, do we have someone from procurement?
Ms. Lane?
Chair, the administration could be able to answer that as well. I would rather the administration, due to Ms. Wiggins alluded to, the administration utilized their best efforts. So I would like to hear that from the administration.
Chair, I concur.
Hi, this is Tom Cross from Metro Legal. I think I can answer that. The solicitation itself was pretty standard form. It presented a lease agreement as sort of the base document. Proposers could have proposed changes to the lease. It offered a relatively short term, but with potential extensions, but it didn't limit people in what they could potentially do within the facility. It did contemplate the possibility of provision of healthcare services, including skilled nursing services.
Councilmember Allen, is that?
Yeah, that answers my question. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Benedict.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone who's here today. I am very hopeful we'll gain a much better understanding of what's happened. I do have some follow-up questions based on what Ms. Falls shared with us. So if you could answer this, that'd be great, or somebody from the administration. One of the things that you said was there was a variety of reasons why Signature was unable to get the licenses and locations. So if we have 419 beds, and I realize it's in that facility, but when you say a variety of reasons why they couldn't get the licenses, can you share what are those reasons?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that. It's really Signature. I know what I've heard and been told, but that would be speculative, and I just really am not comfortable answering that. I think part of it has to do, and now I'm going to speculate. I think part of it has to do with the state is reluctant to split licenses, and also there was a desire, as I understand it from our outside legal counsel on certificate of need matters, to there was a desire to sort of control the number of skilled nursing beds because there is excess capacity. But I can't, I'm just repeating secondhand what I've been told, and that's why I was deliberately vague in that.
Okay, thank you for that. So it sounds like a good question for signature, and I guess, Chair, before I've got some more feedback and questions for signature, if you can entertain me and let me talk for a minute. I've got a few questions and a couple statements. Based on the lease agreement being the base of this agreement, is it the administration's opinion that signature is more of a REIT, a real estate investment trust, rather than an actual healthcare provider? Is their business model based on facilities, or is it based on patient care? Does anyone know?
Hi, this is Tom again. The Signature's a nursing home operator. They have facilities in the Nashville area other than the operation of the Bordeaux facility. They're not a real estate trust as far as I know. When we issued the solicitation, the idea was to provide some flexibility both to people who might want to provide skilled nursing care there, but also possibly to do something else, some other kind of medical care or other uses in the facility. We didn't want to be limiting.
Okay, thank you. So I think those are the technical pieces. Chair, I've just got a statement I want to share, which is, quite frankly, let me back up. Is there anybody from Signature from a corporate perspective that's on the call? If I may, Chair, ask that question again.
Please, thank you. I don't believe so. I will say, Councilman Benedict, in conversations, I asked very directly if they will be joining us. I'll read you here in a bit. I'll get back to that, but I'll read you a statement that was sent to me in regards from the Signature leadership. But I do want to get to other council members' questions, and I've written them down. I've seen some hands that have dropped, but Councilmember Hurt. So I'll tell you, Councilmember Hurt, Paul, and Mendez are what I have next, and then I'll get to Councilmember Welsh immediately after Councilmember Mendez.
Thank you, Chair. If I may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have quite a few questions myself, because I'm still unclear about the option that may have been offered in order to keep the facility open. Was it absolutely necessary to close it? Was that the original expectation in 2014, I guess it was, when they first made they removed the requirement that Metro provide long-term care? In the wind down plan, Signature said that the plan would be effective when consent and approval necessary for the discontinuance and closure would occur. And I want to know who provided that consent and approval, when, and was it provided verbally or written? I'm interested to know why Signature did not apply for COVID-19 funds for Bordeaux. As I understand, they did apply for COVID-19 funds for their other facilities. And I also need some clarification, because Councilmember Hall mentioned last night in Health and Hospitals of a plan that Anthem and Meharry had to provide continuous care. So was there any other options sought other than Signature?
Councilor, this is Mike Jameson. I know there were several questions there, and with respect to the original intent back in 2014 and the subsequent legislation that followed, I had the pleasure of working on the council or with the council at that time. And I think it might be helpful for your colleagues who were in their first year of their first term just to hear a little bit about that. That'll sort of flesh out the intent behind this. At least it was as it was originally coursing through the council. For purposes of the council members in their first year, there is a charter provision in the very first section of the charter that sort of spells out the fundamental functions and duties that Metro government is taking on. And it's exactly what you would expect. It would be public safety functions, police and fire, schools. There's also provisions for hospitals and housing for the aged and health. And then there's a section below that in the same section of the charter that does spell out that it's within the power of the council to decide that Metro can get out of any of those functions if it wants to, if it files an ordinance declaring that a particular function is obsolete and unnecessary. So in 2014, that's what the council did with an ordinance that was designed in part to create lease agreements and dispose of the property that the Bordeaux facility was on and allow for the private operation of the long-term care facility and gradually wind down the annual subsidies. The council used to spend enormous amount of hours concerning the subsidies that were going on for both Bordeaux and the Knowles home that were in excess of $10 million, and a great deal of consternation about how to reduce that. So in 2014, they start this stair-stepping process down of, number one, declaring essentially Metro's involvement in long-term care to be obsolete and unnecessary. They use the magic words, and declaring them no longer to be governmental functions. And that ordinance was adopted 29-1, pretty convincingly. Then in 2016, after what you heard Mary Falls discussing regarding the state's General Assembly's inaction, the inability of Signature to get the second facility, the council adopts the next ordinance regarding the construction of a new nursing home facility to replace the Bordeaux long-term facility, settling at that point on a $3.5 million subsidy. So with those two ordinances in place, the course was set, so to speak, on how Metro as a whole was proceeding regarding Bordeaux. I would read this one paragraph that was the final paragraph in the analysis for that second ordinance, but it talks about both of them, sort of, where are we at now? Just a couple of lines. It says, there is no legal requirement or any requirement set forth in the proposed agreement that Signature continue to accept new patients who are unable to pay. It must therefore be contemplated that both BL 2014-688 and BL 2016-422, carried to their practical conclusion, may herald complete divestment by Metro from long-term care services. One last note to add, and I think you've heard already, and if not repeatedly, there is no requirement that Signature accept or care for patients who are unable to pay. And that is, we have no patients there that are not reaching that status. They're all cared for at the time. But that was only because back in 2014 with the original contract, we did want to make sure that they weren't going to just kick patients to the curb who were uncovered. So the agreement at that time was you cannot kick out uncovered patients. You're under no obligations to accept new uncovered patients, but you can't kick them out. And so that stuck as a contractual term, but that's why you've seen some patients referenced that were under that condition. If that helps with sort of where the council has come since 2014, that's sort of the course that's been charted.
Councilmember Hurt.
You didn't really speak to the transitioning and the fact that Signature seemed to be the only one or the only agency that Metro, the mayor's office, worked with, particularly. I also, Ms. Fall's first statement and almost her last statement talked about how the mayor cares for the citizens and the employees, the residents, and all. I want to know specifically, what has the mayor done specifically to care for the citizens and the employees at Bordeaux Hospital? You know, they say you begin with the end in mind. So the first objective was to care for those people. What did he do to care for those people? And we know care better for those residents. And the other thing I want to say, and I guess I can't even expect to get any real answers, because I've been going through this conversation since July with the mayor's office. But where's the moral responsibility? We talk about legal, we talk about policies. Where's the compassion? Where's the responsibility as human beings? It sounds like you all are saying that the council made decisions to do one thing. Signature says it's the administration's fault. The administration says the Signature's fault. Everybody is passing the blame, but yet we still in a situation where these people are without jobs, where there are going to be people moving from a location, and I think that some of that probably will end up in fatalities. Especially during this pandemic. And I just think that the city of Nashville needs to be more caring of its citizens than what has been exhibited through this entire process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurt. We'll go Councilmember Hall, Mendez, Welsh, Benedict. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Really quick, because I've got so many points I'd like to emphasize, and I'm going to try to make sure I give everybody time, since this has been a conversation even predating 2020, going all the way back to legislation that Mr. Jameson recently mentioned about council deciding to reduce the subsidies, which still baffles me because of the level of subsidy that we give Nashville General, but not these two facilities, and how personally and from a community standpoint, the more you dig into it, the more you look at it, everybody sees the same thing, which is this place was basically intentionally run into the ground and neglected. But I'll circle back with a couple of points really quick. One, Metro's necessity to wind down being stemmed from a council decision and ordinance to determine to reduce the subsidy and how to wind down and in what event, then the determination for this wind down should have been brought back before council first, or the council body should be the one making the determination whether this wind down takes place or not. Contract aside, Signature can decide to do what it wants, but Metro's response to that is to come back to council, who put this in motion to begin with. Secondly, I want to touch on and get some clarity around when the Army Corps decided to do the 60 beds somewhere else, meaning Nashville General, because of the deficiencies. When were those deficiencies discovered? And what was the response to being notified of those deficiencies? That's the first question. Second question is, specifically, if we know the date, was that date known and those deficiencies known prior to the budget? And why wasn't allocation adequately made to deal with those deficiencies so that that facility could qualify for and be utilized in the manner in which it should have been? Third question would be, when it comes to the COVID money, I currently have legislation sitting at legal, sitting at finance, now going in front of CARES Act committee for $5 million in COVID funds of the 27 that we've identified that's still available to go to this facility, knowing that it was going to be around $6 million for a January to January extension to cover everything. I also asked for $1.2 million in the 4% fund or emergency fund. So what has the administration asked for, and why doesn't the administration expedite that process or request those funds themselves? Chair.
Councilmember Hall, are those questions geared to the administration?
Yes.
Ms. Foss?
I'll do my best to answer the ones that the portions of those questions that I know myself. Regarding the Army Corps of Engineer, I don't have the specific date offhand when they went to visit. I just don't remember. It was in April. They did not provide a list of deficiencies. They looked at the site and told us it was not suitable. So, and that was not in writing. That was just, they moved on, right? Everyone was hustling really fast then to get that, an alternate care site up and running really fast. And they did it in, I think, 30 days at Nashville General and just really got it moving. So they should be commended for their work there. And then the COVID, the CARES Act funds that you referenced, we might have someone from finance on, is there someone from finance on? Chair Taylor.
Chairman Taylor, this is Mary Jo Wiggins.
Ms. Wiggins, thank you so much. Could you please answer for that question or some insight?
Yes, the coronavirus relief fund that Councilmember Hall referred to, those funds expire on December 30th. So without further looking into eligibility of all the types of expenditures that would be incurred with the facility, the most important criteria is that they expire on December 30th and wouldn't be available after that date for use of operations.
Thank you. Councilman Hall.
I'm aware that the money or the subsidy ends in December, hence asking for $5 million that we know is available now that could be allocated now. In addition to that, with the April visit from Army Corps, that was still several months before the budget was voted on. What budget allocations or what investigation did the administration do into those deficiencies as to why it did not qualify or could be utilized? What was the dollar amount of those deficiencies that could have been or should have been asked for in the budget?
I don't know the answers. We did not get a list of so-called deficiencies. The word deficiency was never mentioned, so I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer that.
Well, maybe Mr. James can answer, because we met earlier in the year before the budget. This was one of the things that came up, and both he and the mayor were in the room when we mentioned that. And I believe, again, it was April for the month, not an exact date, somewhere in excess of almost $8 million in deficiencies. And the reason I ask is because, to the point of neglect, year after year, myself and previous council members have gone this route in CIB and budget back and forth conversations, trying to get funds allocated, knowing that there was a need that was growing for the base of that facility itself, the plan itself. And so to share to Councilmember Hurt's questions, there are some serious concerns of how we got to this point, what could have been done and at what point, and moreover, what can be done immediately to end this conversation, which is that CARES Act money that we do know is available, because we're getting the updates every week from those council members that are on the committee.
So, Councilman Hall, my understanding was that the Corps of Engineers was looking for a floor and within various counties. and wanted to explore any and all facilities that were remotely eligible from a healthcare perspective. And they went to various locations, and I don't recall them saying that the Bordeaux location was deficient. I don't recall them sending us, they certainly sent us nothing in writing that was any type of itemized list of you don't have adequate ventilation, nothing like that. It just didn't meet their needs. And that's all we got from them. So in terms of rectifying some list of deficiencies that we got from them, that's not my understanding of how they approached it. In terms of the previous observation about why funding for general when not funding for Bordeaux, again, the historic trajectory of the council has been to declare, in a nutshell, we want out of long-term care, not hospital care. They still consider that one of the core functions under the charter. But long-term care, the council specifically noted that they want out of that business, and they made very specific observations about the industry. And just to truncate what the council was concluding, which I think is still the case in the private sector, is that essentially the private sector has figured out a better way to provide care more cheaply without a subsidy. And that was extremely attractive to the council. And there are facilities throughout the mid-states that provide care to indigent patients without a subsidy. And they do it at rankings of 3, 4, and 5-star rankings under CMS rankings. And you were not getting that at Bordeaux, and the council wanted that change, and that has not been altered to my knowledge since then. And in terms of
and then
the
just
CARES
for clarity's
Act
sake,
committee allocations, all I know is that we have a committee process that's been established by council ordinance, and I think that's worked fairly well.
It has. We're going to continue to go through that. They assured us that they could make a decision in a week because they were meeting every Thursday. But I'm having a hard time with, for so many years, no one knowing or keeping track of the deficiencies that were taking place, and especially since they were constantly being mentioned during each budget cycle and each CIB. In addition to that, that conversation we know originally started in 2004 when Councilman at-large Maynard and then District Councilman Matthews started that legislation about the changing in the healthcare industry, and that's I get that, I understand that, but hindsight is 2020, which clearly we know what the trajectory was and what previous councils talked about, but clearly they were wrong. They were not prepared for this type of situation where we are in a budgetary issue overall as a city, and when you have a global pandemic that impacts everyone, because no additional resources were rushed to that site after the COVID outbreak or since. Nothing was rushed to it before the budget or since. And I'm still struggling with that. If we say we care and we're trying to figure out the best way to approach this, what's on the table now, I don't think by anybody on this call or anybody in the community is really an option or an adequate option. And so what we're all on here now trying to do is figure out the best path forward and how we can protect the most vulnerable folks, which was alluded to earlier. 25% statistically don't survive being moved or being displaced, some have been residents of this facility 25, 27, 35 years, some who are wards of the state, so forth and so on. And you're in a district with the highest fatality rate for COVID currently, and we couldn't even get a testing site at this location that has more vent units than the other hospitals and empty space. But we chose to put a plan in place to work at Music City Center. And I can go back and pull up the emails March, April, June to multiple folks in the administration that here's the strategic plan. I have the two most vulnerable and disproportionately impacted communities in rural whites and blacks. I average 2 chronic illnesses per household. You give all the data and so forth and so on the district, and then this facility inside the district, and nothing has been done to create a strategic plan, no PPEs, no triage, no nothing for the district or these facilities. So it's clearly a pattern of neglect that I'm not getting answers to, and I don't think other people are comfortable with the answers that are being given, because right now the only thing that matters is saving those lives and then saving those employees. And I'm hearing everything but a real solution to move forward to do those two things. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Paul. Mr. Jameson or Ms. Falls, would you all like to answer that?
I don't know what question is on the table.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
Thank you.
didn't hear a question, but I do think it bears repeating that we did an RFQ and there were no bids submitted. We can't conjure operators for the facility. I'm not sure.
Chair, not to interrupt, but we're dancing around with semantics here. Every time an RFQ comes up for this facility, it's the same situation. Nobody wants it because it's not being fairly subsidized by the city and been in decline physically. Everybody knows that. So where was the plan, knowing that this is part of that same pattern? If you have trouble every RFQ, why was there nothing in place, and why are we not hearing about any option that should have been in place, knowing that you were not going to get someone to respond just like every other time?
Thank you, Councilmember. Council members, I want to also let you know that Ms. Michelle Lane is on the call as well. I know we had some procurement questions earlier, so if you do have procurement questions, Ms. Michelle Lane is on the call as well. Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Mendez.
Thanks, Chair. I had some comments jotted down, and I guess Councilmember Hall's passion is maybe got me not sure whether to follow up on that or go back to the comments I was going to make. You know, a lot of you know that what I do for a living is restructure distressed businesses, and I've had a lot of experience with restructuring or trying to restructure healthcare related businesses, including nursing facilities. I've got a client now that out of a different city that manages and operates some 12.5 nursing homes in multiple states, and that gives me some insight into the business and the economic model. And one of the things that I see from that experience is that some of the comments like Councilman Hall makes are sort of standard things that you expect to hear when talking about a nursing home, especially a single site nursing home. The economy over the last 10, 15 years has decided it doesn't like single site healthcare facilities. That's why the council moved, before any of us were on the council, toward getting Metro out of the business, because it's essentially impossible to even think about breaking even on a single site nursing facility, period. Reimbursements from the government have been squeezed. That's why the decision had to be made last time this came around the council, that Signature wouldn't have to provide indigent care, because you just can't make it work. And that leads, you hear all the time about how hospitals are closing all over the state. Single site hospitals run into the same issues that single site nursing homes run into. You can't break even today with that as a business model. And of course, we're not a business. The city's not a business. And we have, despite the press clippings, we've got unlimited money to put into this, because we've got bonding capacity, and we could subsidize this to $1 million a year, $6 million a year, $20 million a year. We could do it. We could do whatever we want, because we're not a business. But everybody should be clear that there's 0% chance that this facility could be run as a break-even operation unless it was part of a much larger system, and somebody paid a couple decades worth of deferred maintenance to bring the building up to a totally different level than it is right now. And those are realities. And when facilities all over the country run into those realities, there's inevitably good-hearted people like Councilman Hall around to say, yeah, but that's a tragedy. That's a travesty. That's not the way the world should work. It's unfair. These are real human beings, and I'm not going to repeat all the things. I couldn't say it as well as Councilman Hall said it. But there's this notion of saying something is intentionally run into the ground. That's the other side of the coin of total lack of financial viability. And depending on your perspective, you either see one side of the coin of it being intentionally run to the ground, or you see the other side of the coin where there's no way absent writing 7-figure checks, maybe 8-figure checks every year to make it work. And so where does that leave us? The market doesn't like this. The only way for it to exist, as Councilman Hall has pointed out, is writing a really big check every single year into perpetuity. And previous councils have decided to not do that. They would prefer to move in the direction of away from that. And I'm not going to, people can decide for themselves what different administrations' intents are. But right now, the choices are basically rebid it with literally a blank dollar amount to fill in for an operator and ask them what it would take to run it. And knowing that it would take a lot of capital expenditure money as well as a big operating subsidy every year, or to figure out how to humanely make Metro's approach to healthcare match where the rest of the economy has gone, mostly 10, 15 years ago. And the moral choice, in my view, and I run into this in my paying professional life, and I think now the moral choice cannot be about today, because today the answer is let's keep everything the same. The moral choice for the city and for patients is to maximize their care, and there's trauma involved with moving. There's no question about that. But maximizing care in the long run has to be about having people in a higher ranked facility. And I know this will continue to drive a lot of passionate conversation. And I have to go in a couple minutes to another call anyway, but I want to at least share the framework that I look at this through, and I appreciate the time, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Mendez. Councilmember Welsh, you have a question?
Thank you. I have some questions, and I also have a comment. I appreciate Councilmember Mendez's comments. But what I fear is missed in all this conversation about break-evens and whatever is that break-evens are usually done on the backs of workers, lower wages, race to the bottom for everyone who works in these types of facilities. Workers in Metro working at the Bordeaux facility fare better because there is a union here and a union contract. There are better wages. And so I don't think that the answer is always the race to the bottom and going to what might seem on the face of it as being the easiest way to break even. It seems to me that one of the most obvious things is that Signature did not bid because there was no mention of a subsidy, because we all understand there is a problem without a subsidy to run this facility. And I wondered if the mayor's office could tell me what percentage of the operating budget at Bordeaux was in fact the subsidy. And then I have a couple follow-up questions with that too.
I don't know the answer to that.
I can appreciate that you might not have that answer right away. I feel like perhaps that we as a city, as a council, perhaps need to change our approach to this. There are other options with this facility. I think that if we invested in this facility,
I know that this is a very expensive proposition, but if we invested in this facility, if we tied it into community-based care that once again went back to Nashville General Hospital, and we made this a continuum of care that allowed people to stay in their community and have good quality of care, that we could make this a 3, 4, 5-star facility and get away from subsidies down the road. But it takes an investment and it takes a commitment on all of our parts to believe that it is worth keeping people in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in our community, that it is worth paying our workers decent wages, keeping our unions up and running, and realizing that, yeah, you have to spend money to make money, and that we've done it in other things in this city. We've invested with tax breaks and tax subsidies for other corporations. Our citizens are worth at least as much. And so perhaps that we need to change our frame and change how we look at this and realize it's going to be a long-term project, but we can make this a viable facility for patients and for workers and something that we are proud of in this community. And I hope that we start to have that conversation so that we don't get rid of a jewel in our community that has provided good services to our most vulnerable citizens and provided workers in our community good jobs. So thank you. Chair?
Thank you, Councilmember Welsh. Ms. Falls, did you all get a chance to have an answer for Councilmember Welsh's question?
I don't think we're going to be able to give you an exact answer to that specific question about what percentage of Signature's operating budget Metro is contributing. They do, all of the patients in the facility now have a payer source, I think largely Medicare or Medicaid. So Metro is not paying 100% of the operating cost. We're making up the difference between what they receive in reimbursements and whatever other sources of revenue they have.
Thank you. Councilmember Welsh?
What other revenue sources does Bordeaux have besides the subsidy?
They have the variety of payer sources for the patients. So veterans benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay. Every patient has a payer source.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Welsh, you have any other further questions?
Not at this point. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. So my focus at this point is, where do we go from here? Are we going to continue with the wind down? Or are we going to look at other options? Of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so the timing is awful for both the residents who are our most vulnerable population, as well as the employees who have been with Bordeaux Hospital, some folks, 30 plus years. My understanding is that we have $6 million budgeted for the subsidy for the fiscal year. To my understanding, about 1.2-ish million has been dispersed so far, so that leaves about $4.8 million remaining of the budgeted subsidy. We have COVID-19 funds. All of the residents are currently receiving their Medicaid recipients, so they have insurance. I actually looked at the July and August income statements for Signature, and they had roughly about $1.1 million in revenue and $1.5 million in expenses. And so we're paying a little over $400,000 a month to subsidize their losses. So my question is, can we basically buy ourselves some time to look at this some more? I spoke with Dr. Webb with Nashville General. He said that they could do an assessment of what it would take for them to provide the care. They could do that assessment within 2 weeks, as long as they had access to the information that they need to make that assessment. So can we, I know Signature is going to leave January 31st, but can we look at Nashville General taking over the care for now? And maybe long term, the answer is to wind it down and to get out of the long-term care business. However, we're in a global pandemic. This is really a bad time for residents and for employees. So can we buy ourselves some time, allow Nashville General to do that assessment, to look at whether or not they could, take this on, and, let's look at this again, next year. So signature leave in January 31st. Let's look at this, in June of next year. And again, like if we need to close it, then maybe that's the best decision. But as Councilwoman Welch said, we haven't made any type of investment in this facility. There's a lot of repairs that need to be made, and we've invested in other things. I mean, look at all the great buildings that we have downtown. Why can't we put that same investment into the Bordeaux Hospital and make it that 3, 4, 5-star facility so that it can provide better care and provide a better environment for the folks that live there? And we can continue on with the care that we've been given. Because for some folks, Mary Falls mentioned earlier that we've moved in long-term care, we've moved away from the big institutions. Now it's about aging in place. It's about having a home-like environment. So you're not just moving people to a different facility like you're, giving them a new outfit to wear. This is their home. You're completely disrupting their lives by moving them to different facilities. So if we don't have to do that right now, I think that we should pursue other options, in particular Nashville General, since they've done this work in the past and they have experience and the capacity to do it.
Thank you, Councilmember Toombs. Nashville General representatives, could you please speak to this comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is Sherry Gibbs, and I am just going to read a statement from Dr. Joseph Webb, the Chief Executive Officer of Nashville General Hospital. And he begins, first and foremost, I defer to Mayor Cooper and the Metro Council's wishes as to how they choose to proceed with utilizing the Bordeaux Skilled Nursing Facility. If the mayor and the Metro Council choose for Bordeaux to remain a skilled nursing facility, my belief is that Nashville General Hospital, which is a full-service acute care hospital, is a viable option for providing operational oversight. Having said that, it does come with a few caveats. Nashville General's leadership during the last 6 years has not been privy to the financial and operational details of Bordeaux. Recognizing time is of the essence, we must gain access to that information in order to assist Metro in making an informed decision. Nashville General Hospital welcomes an opportunity to review Bordeaux's historical, financial, and operational details alongside Mayor Cooper and the Metropolitan Hospital Authority Board in order to make a final decision about the future of the Bordeaux Skilled Nursing Facility that is in the best interest of the patients and employees.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Do you have anything else to add?
Not at this time. We stand behind our statement.
Thank you. Councilmember Toombs, do you have any further questions?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to hear from the administration whether or not they would consider that. Again, Nashville General potentially has the capacity to take this over. They've done it before. Like I said, I spoke with Dr. Webb myself personally. He said that they could do that assessment within a couple of weeks as long as they are privy to all of the information that they need. So would the administration be open to that, or are we just moving forward with the wind down?
Thank you. We got the same statement from Dr. Webb. I think the key, several points about that. One is that what he has expressed in the statement that was just read was operational oversight. That means you have to have an operator, and we don't have a licensed operator for the facility. No one responded to the RFQ. And so that's a critical factor. Without an operator, there's nothing to oversee. The second item is Nashville General has expressed that they wanted to preserve the opportunity to potentially have a skilled nursing facility elsewhere as their plans, their strategic plan develops as part of their healthcare delivery continuum. It's important to point out that Signature is contractually obligated to return the bed licenses to Metro upon the completion of their contract. We're in conversations with Nashville General about placing those licenses on inactive status for potential future use by them. We're advised that it is legally possible to do that, and certainly we are planning to endeavor to retain the inactive licenses, and we will continue the conversations with Nashville General on that point.
Councilmember Toombs, any follow-up questions?
Respectfully, I don't think that actually answered my question. And I don't know what, I understand your interpretation of operational oversight. When I spoke to Dr. Webb, I said, could you run the facility? And he's not on the call, so I don't want to put words into his mouth. So my question is the administration open to the idea of Nashville General, since they've run Bordeaux Hospital before, they're already part of the city, they're not an outside entity, they're part of the city. Is the administration open to allowing Nashville General to do the assessment and to objectively consider whether or not they can take on the operation of Bordeaux Hospital?
I think we're going to have to confer and report back to you. My understanding is that Nashville General Hospital would have to have a separate outside operator because they lack the skilled nursing set permit, licensure that would allow them to just assume the operations. It's not that simple of a deal. If they could assume that immediately, of course, we'd be interested in talking to them. That's not what we understood from Dr. Webb, but absolutely happy to explore that if he thinks that's possible in the short term. I would never have expected that sort of turnaround within a 60, 90-day period, but I stand to be corrected.
Excuse me, Chair, but that same request and questioning that Councilmember Toombs is asking is exactly what I asked back in July to Ms. Falls. So this is not the first time of them hearing of this. She and I were on phone calls with Dr. Webb in regards to this. So with all due respect, Mr. Jameson, this isn't the first time, and I've had subsequent conversations with Mr. Phillips and suggested the same thing. So it seems to me that we are skirting around, and that's the problem that I have. If we're going to be transparent, let's be transparent to not only the council, but to our constituents. Given that subsidy that you give to Signature is a for-profit business. Metro General or Nashville General is a part of the Metro family. So that money would stay basically within the family while we provide that care. So in terms of exploring and doing this, there's been times allotted for the exploration. And it just seems to me that there's a different agenda on the table that's not being disclosed.
Council Lady Hurt, you know, you and I have had some very good conversations in the years I've known you and in recent weeks, and I am an enormous admirer of your passion for the hospital in particular. You know that. What I was very hopeful of is that this meeting that was, I think, intended by Councilman Taylor as a full transparency meeting would include some of the people that we've been talking about but not hearing from. I will do everything possible on the face of the earth to get you, Dr. Webb, and Signature in front of the mayor if everybody would get in the same room. I thought that was going to happen today for reasons I'm not sure I understand. He's not here. Signature isn't here. We're here to answer your questions. And I'm telling you the God's honest truth of what I understand the General Hospital capabilities are and the expressions of interest that have been given to us by Dr. Webb. And I would really hope he'd be here to answer the same questions, but for some reason he's not. Unless you and I work to correct that.
I understand that Dr. Webb had eye surgery today, and that's the reason why he's not on the call today, but if there was something that needed to be done for a general hospital, I think it could have been expressed prior to today in terms of them. But no one said that there was that they were not capable, to my understanding. Once the assessment was done, then that could have been made, but no one was able or no one authorized to give him the right or the opportunity to go in and do an assessment. And also I did ask a question about who gave the consent for the wind down. Does anyone know the answer to that question?
Ultimately, the state has to approve the wind down plan, which includes a plan for placing the patients in other facilities and for alerting the employees of the wind down. They, as required by the contract, showed us a copy of it and made a few changes, including some having to do with property belonging to Metro in the facility and what becomes of it at the end of the term. And we approved their submission of the plan to the state for approval.
May I also say a word, Chair Taylor?
Please, thank you.
Thank you. Council Lady Hurt referenced a conversation we had in July, and I continue to have a very different takeaway from that conversation. We had a conversation in August with Dr. Webb, and I am not comfortable publicly talking about that conversation without him here. I sent him a follow-up email to make clear my understanding of that conversation, and as far as I know, that was my understanding was correct. He did not tell me that was incorrect. My understanding of our conversation. Nashville General Hospital had an opportunity to participate in the RFQ just like everybody else. They did not. I assume they did not because they're not a licensed operator. The terms of the RFQ are designed to be in the best interest of the patients at the facility and of the community. And we've been very clear all along since January that the sole goal of the RFQ for this property is that it result in an operation that is a blessing to that community. There is no hidden agenda. We have been very clear all along. There are no hidden deals. There are no choosing winners and losers. The mayor was not going to put his thumb on the scale one way or the other in favor of one group or another group, that we were going to have a transparent process. And that process resulted in no bids. So the suggestion that there's an ulterior motive or not, us not being forthright or honest is simply inaccurate. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to set the record straight on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Vercher, I have you in the queue next.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I liked how you outlined how you wanted them at the meeting to go. The unfortunate thing with meetings is that you just never know how they're gonna evolve. I would say this just for those that's listening on the call. As a sitting council member, I don't know what to take away from this. There's been backdoor conversations, representatives from the administration not feeling comfortable to speak freely. It leaves me in a position as to not knowing what to believe. And if I feel that way, I'm sure others on this call feel the same, and also the general public. This is a terrible example of divestment going wrong. I've stated this before. I had to state it day before yesterday on our committee. We always have to be very mindful of the message that we're sending to our most vulnerable communities. I'm hearing a lot of conversations, a lot of skirting, Haven't heard anything about a plan. And I can say we're here because no one really wanted to deal with it. I keep hearing being alluded to that the council members are passionate. Stop saying that. That's a little insulting. When we advocate for our communities, that's more than passion. That's the love for our people. And we're here again because some communities, and I've said this every year I've been on council, some communities continue to be done wrong by this government and by this city. So we can assume core civic and all of that liability during a pandemic. But we still haven't had a serious conversation about a solution for this mess. My question is this. We don't have signature on the call. There's been a lot of backdoor conversations. I still haven't heard who actually owns this. I don't know if that's Ms. Falls, but signature acts to not attend, because it usually doesn't happen when we have an entity that we're doing business with, that they don't want to be part of the conversation. So that's my first question.
Councilmember Virtue.
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor, I do have a statement from Signature I would like to read. Do you mind if I read that at this moment?
You can read it, but that wasn't my question. But go ahead, Chair.
Okay. So I received this on Sunday, and I will tell you this, that I sent personal emails to each individual that we wanted to have on this call, again, for the transparency and to answer questions that definitely would come up in their purview. And that was, of course, with the administration. And I would like to say I thank Mary Falls for getting back to me immediately when that email went out. Sent it to Signature, to Mr. Keith Boyce. He's the Regional Vice President of Signature. And also sent it to Nashville General Hospital immediately, because there had been a lot of conversation in regards to General and their opportunity to be a part of Bordeaux Hospital. And I did hear back from them as well. But from Signature, I received a note on Sunday that says, "Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for the invitation. Please read this as our official statement in your meeting. We appreciate it greatly. On Monday, October 19th, 2020, we are issuing formal written notices about the wind down of Bordeaux to all parties, including the state of Tennessee, CMS, all families, all residents, and all employees. Thereafter, once both CMS and the state respond to our notice, we can better estimate as to how long the wind down process may be expected to take. Please know the process will commence in a diligent way to safely discharge all residents to other facilities over the next 2 months to a new home of their choosing. We will be scheduling family and employee meetings all throughout the rest of this week, including Wednesday. Accordingly, we will be spending all of our time and focus on our residents, families, and staff. We appreciate your understanding. We have undertaken this process as the direction of the city." And I know you're in question, Chair, but I will like to chime in is that Mr. Davidson.
Well, they gave the answer right there in their statement, Chair. They said at the direction of the city. That's abundantly clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Virtue, I know you had a few questions. I stopped you. Do you have any additional questions?
Yeah, so we talked about General and about them not being an operator. And Ms. Falls, you can correct me. My understanding is that you've been heavily involved in this, in the conversations. But if we were to explore the utilization of General Hospital being a short-term solution for this, they would simply have to hire someone who has a license. they wouldn't have to get a license, would they? That's a question. And then also I'm going to my notes here. The 400, the licenses that we had, Ms. Falls alluded to. We would return the bed licenses. Do we sell those? Like, what's the details involved in that? And I hope they're writing my questions down, because other council members, I don't think they were. And also, to whom did the RFQ go out to, and for how long? And was it just one attempt to seek out an operator? And then my last question would be, was one more. Did the administration seek like any outside consultation from nursing home operator experts as it related to before making the wind down decision, before giving the go ahead as expressed in signatures letter, and also expressed by the legal team a few moments ago? And so that we're all clear, is the position of this mayor is that we should end being in the nursing home or long care, for lack of better words, business? I think that last question is important, because if their position is yes, then we don't need to continue down this path and giving a community hope and all of that, considering everything that's going on. And those were my questions, Chair. Thank you so much.
Chair, I'd like to answer that last one.
Councilman Hall, if you could just give us 1 second, I'll come back to you.
Oh, and then one more. Don't we own that land? If they can chime into that one too.
Am I can I respond now?
Yes,
Chair?
Ms. Ross, thank you.
Okay. Let me start at the back and move forward. Do we own the land? Yes, we own the land. And the land, unlike in 2014 and 2016, the RFQ did not include the sale of the property. Should we be out of the business? As I mentioned in the narrative I gave at the beginning, our intention all along, including through the current RFQ, was to not get out of the business. So, for example, in January, when we started these conversations and we lined up site tours and things in March, as I described, that was in anticipation of continuing the operation of services. And the RFQ that actually was produced contemplated the continuation of services. It also opened the possibility of, if there's a better option for the property, then that would be interesting to the community to know as well. So the answer to that question I've addressed. So the preceding question was, do we have outside experts help us with the wind down? And let me just be clear, when Councilmember Vercher, when you referenced that the signature letter references at the direction of Metro, that is legally correct. By the terms of the agreement, when there was a failure to receive a bid, we were contractually, and I mentioned that I read you those words in my earlier comments, we were contractually obligated to, quote, direct them to engage to undertake the orderly wind down of the property. So their language was correct. That doesn't reflect a choice, that reflects the legal reality. And I'm sorry, back to your point about the outside experts. The only outside experts we've used is we have a lawyer who is a highly regarded expert in Nashville who has advised us regarding licensing and the wind down plan and so on. And she's been very helpful, and we're very fortunate to have her assistance on a pro bono basis. the return of the bed license, you asked if it's possible to sell the bed licenses. I don't know the answer to that. It's something that we have actually been asked if we would be interested in selling those, and haven't gotten that far. I don't. Our focus right now has been on trying to manage the orderly wind down of the facility and focus on making sure that we retain those bed licenses in an inactive status. So it's something we can certainly look at if you would like us to. And then you asked a question about if Nashville General were interested, could they hire out or would they have to get a license? I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is that it could be either one. And then also before that, Councilwoman Vercher, you expressed some consternation about that I was not willing to share a private conversation. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. There was nothing sinister in it. I just feel like just like I wouldn't share a conversation I have with you at a public forum, I would much prefer that you speak for yourself. So I'm not intending to hide anything, but
yeah, Ms. Pauls, the difference is any conversation you and I have, you're more than open to share it with anyone. I mean, that's the whole frame of being transparent.
Well, he may say the same thing. He's not here, and so I'm trying to be an honorable person and not say something that he might not completely agree with what I thought I heard. So I'm trying to be very honorable about that.
I only made that point because you stated that your takeaway from the conversation was different. So the people on the call, we don't have the context of what the conversation was. So you opened that up.
Okay. Well, then forgive me, please, and I'll share with you what my sense is that I'm comfortable saying. I asked Dr. Webb if he was interested in operating nursing beds, a nursing facility at his current location. And he said he was not interested in doing that. Like, could we transfer a portion of the licenses there? And he said he was not interested in that for a variety of very practical reasons. It was nothing sinister. It was very practical reasons. I asked him if he was interested in this location for his hospital. Because he reminded me that their lease expires in a few years, and he said he was not interested in that. And so again, this is Mary Fall's interpretation of our conversation. He said he was interested in helping, if he could in some way provide some help to transition, that he would be happy, that he was happy to do that if that was a possibility. And I explained to him that indeed we had an operator who was transitioning us to the other side. Signature had agreed already to do that. We already had a contract with them. That's the amendment. So the amendment is the bridge. So what's at the other end of the bridge? It's find a new operator or there is no new operator. And that's where we are right now. That was the results of the RFQ.
Okay, so Ms. Falls, was the context of the conversation moving patients to general or general running the facility from the current location where it is now?
I was trying to figure out any plan, like trying to understand what all the options were.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Vercher. I do have a follow-up question. Ms. Falls, when Signature is, when their contract is completed in January, do they not, does the contract not require them to return the license to the city?
Yes, it does.
And from there, with the licensing, so how, in regards to Nashville General, how does that happen? How does Nashville General receive the licensing from the city of Nashville as a part of the city?
The city would, as I understand it, the city owns the licenses. So when the contract expires, that is an asset that reverts back to Metro. We have the option, which we plan to pursue, to put those licenses on inactive status, which in our conversations with Nashville General, that's what they were interested in. And that seems legally possible. And we have every reason to believe that that can happen. So that's something we don't want to forfeit, in our opinion, we don't want to forfeit those licenses. So in the past, the excess licenses would be, it had been contemplated that those would be permanently retired. And we think that that's not the most prudent course.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Michelle Lane, I know there was a question in there for you and you have your hand raised.
Thank you so much, Chairman Taylor. I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarity related to the question from Councilmember Vercher related to the solicitation itself. We did issue that solicitation to a variety of different suppliers providing healthcare as well as real estate type services. And we did issue that solicitation on the 25th of August, and it closed on the 21st of September. So we're looking at, roughly 27 or so days on the street.
Thank you.
27 days in the middle of a pandemic? Okay, all right.
Thank you, Councilmember Vercher. Councilmember Hauser.
Yes, this whole conversation is, for those of us who only recently come on committees to get to hear this, is very disturbing in so many aspects. I really feel that as a city, we are abdicating a responsibility. And I now coming into question the city has certain things we're responsible to handle: police protection, fire protection, street lights, a whole variety. And it sounds like what we're saying is we can abdicate any of those responsibilities to a private contractor. And then if that private contractor says, I don't want to do it anymore, we just stop providing those services. That's how this is sounding like today, to me at least, and this is extremely disturbing. I would like to see us pursue more with General Hospital. We're already giving a subsidy to Nashville General, so I feel like we are definitely a big player in that organization, and that organization is part of Metro. Is there a way that we can tell them that they have to take this on? I mean, this is a service that we as a city should be providing, and if there's not an outside person, what would be the legal recourse for us to say, Nashville General, you are part of Nashville Metro government, and this is something we need you to do. I'd like to know what our recourses would be in regard to that, and also what else can we give up to a private contractor, and if they fall through, we just don't provide that service anymore. Thank you.
Chairman and Councilor Hauser, this is Mike Jameson. So this has been a long running battle, and it originated on the council really through budget consternation. Going back to when the subsidies were, again, approaching or exceeding $10 million. And because the Metro budget is a zero-sum game, that's money that's not available for other priorities that the council has at any given moment. Before it adopted the ordinance in 2014, in response to the question about consultants, this administration has hired one outside attorney that has deep expertise in healthcare, hospital licensure, and so forth. But previous administrations have hired large-scale consultants, and before the 2014 ordinance, both the administration and the hospital authority jointly retained an outside consultant who then went out and surveyed 160 I think it was 167 healthcare providers that did long-term care. And of the 167, 161 said this won't work. As Councilman Mendez was alluding to, rightly or wrongly, for better or worse, this is a dying model. And standalone facilities, for whatever reason in the industry that I'm not smart enough to understand, are not sustainable. And the council was recognizing that. And I think to suggest that the council is abdicating its concerns for patients is not exactly how I would put it. I think what the council was trying to do, and has historically tried to do since 2014 through today, is to make sure those patients are seen to by higher rated facilities. This was a one-star facility, which was clearly on the council's mind. Immediately after the 2016 ordinance, they passed a separate item of legislation specifically expressing their expectation that this facility would get beyond a 1 out of 5 stars. And we're surrounded by facilities that are at higher ratings, that provide indigent care and take no subsidy. But make no mistake, this originated in the council in 2011 and reached a crescendo in 2014. And that is on the books. And to the extent the administration is trying to effectuate what the council does, that is always on the table. And if the council decides that they want to revert and declare that long-term care is now somehow viable, then head down that road. I have no idea how we'll make it work financially, but that's the origin of this controversy.
So is the conclusion then that in addition to the money that we already subsidize Nashville General with, that it would cost us several million more a year if they took this over? Or do you think that the combination of Nashville General, which has excess capacity to include long-term care, would not perhaps improve it because they would be occupying more beds in that facility? Or are you saying this is just two totally different things?
I am wildly speculating as to what Dr. Webb would say. I have to assume, though, that it would be a significant additional expense.
Might I add two points about that as well, if you don't mind? One is we are seeing amply why Tennessee's the only city, or Nashville's the only city in the state that is operating a skilled nursing facility. It is a very challenging business. The second related point is before the pandemic, within Davidson County, the capacity of skilled nursing facilities was at 79%, which is very low. We don't know what it is after the pandemic. We know it's dramatically lower, but that also speaks to why there were no bids on the property. That operators are really struggling. They were struggling before the pandemic. They're struggling more as a result of the pandemic. And this is a very difficult business to be in. So that's just following up on Mike's point.
But Chair, if we had all this information in advance, why we don't have a plan, or is the plan, going back to my question, the position of this administration, we're going to move forward with the wind down? I mean, if we're just call it what it is, and we can save a lot of people a lot of heartache and we just call it what it is. If the position is we're going to move forward with the wind down, then just state that.
I think the answer is what I mentioned a few minutes ago. The plan had not been to wind it down. In the absence of an operator, I don't know where you would find an operator who would want this facility in the next 2 weeks. As it stands right now, Signature started notifying patients and families, I believe, on September 21st. We are now several weeks into this where families have already begun to make other choices. And the census is down from 135 then to 109 now. Families are moving, and I find it very disruptive for them to suggest that there's another alternative. If there is, we need to know who that operator is. I'm very concerned about sending the signal that there's some white knight, and we don't know any white knight at all. So if you know of an operator, we would love to know that, and we would have loved to have known that during the RFQ. But I do think we need to be mindful of the distress this adds to patients' families, suggesting that there is a white knight.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying, just for leadership from the administration, just to be on record to say, you gave your best effort, and this is where we are. I mean, that sends a message to the city. But Chair, looks like we're not going to get that. We're getting a lot of skirting. So, Chair, thank you so much for this call. I'm going to get off it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Vercher. Ms. Falls, did you mention that the wind down letter was sent to patients and families in the midst of the RFQ process?
No, they sent it. If I misspoke on the date,
it's September 21st.
Well, I'm sorry. Then thank you for correcting me. Then it would have been the 23rd. It was 2 days later. And by the way, they did not give written notice. They verbally told patients and staff. Their wind down plan that they submitted to us required that it be in writing, and it should be in writing. They got ahead of themselves on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Swore.
Thank you, Chair. I almost put my hand down and just got off because I've been waiting for a long time. I don't want to repeat what everyone has been saying for the sake of time, but listening to what is coming from the administration, I'm going to have to agree that we dropped the ball big time. And if you want to read between the lines, if you want to read between the answers that are being given, it appears to me that a decision is being made to not continue this, even though that's not what is being said. But if everyone is saying this is not a good business to be in, this is not a profitable business, we're losing money, and everybody's already agreed to that or believe that, then the efforts to save it will not be there, or at a minimum, it will be put at a back burner. That's what I'm hearing. Now, the difference is this. If we choose to do that, that's fine. But we did not take the steps to make sure that that is communicated and there's plan in place to take care of the residents and the staff that are there. I think that's where the problem was that maybe the operator gave us a way out by not bidding. Maybe the fact that we didn't get other bid allow us to be able to use that to say, well, here we are now. Because if we intentionally wanted to save it, we could have done more, in my honest opinion. And from everything that I'm hearing, and I usually give a lot of people a lot of the doubt, the benefit of the doubt. But in this case, it appears to me that more could have been done that was not done. After having said that, the problem with the relocation of the wind down plan, I see two things with it. One, there's the issue of residents that have been there a long time that really don't want to move. You know, there's a psychological trauma to changing after 25 years. And these are people that are already not in the best of health. And so just saying they get to go to a better place by what definition? When that's not the place a patient wants to go to. The other part that we're not talking about are the employees. What about the people that have been working at this place all this time? Do we have a plan to get them somewhere? So those are the things that I think we did not address and that got us here. So those are the issues. What I would recommend strongly, if there's still an opportunity to get a player, if it's not too late for General to be considered or another operator, I want to say that we want to make it a priority We want that discussion this week to get everybody back in the room. Ms. Falls and Mr. Jamison, Chair Taylor, if you can, it doesn't have to be a public meeting, but we need to get everyone back in the room and said, what are the best options right now that we can? And if we can get a player, even if it's on a temporary basis, to make sure that everything is well transitioned, that's what we want to do. And so council made a decision a long time ago. It's a different time, it's a different council. And there was no plan in place. The part of the matter is that there was no plan to adequately wind down, and these people were put at the back burners, and we have to stop doing that. When we talk about equity and justice and taking care of everybody, it's not something that has to be at the back burner. It has to be very intentional, and we have to do it with adequate time. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Suara. Mr. Brad Rayson with SEIU is on the line.
Chair, for the second time, because I know we've only got 9 minutes left. I've got a couple issues I have to address and then get off of here. Is that possible?
I come right back to you after Mr. Rayson. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Thank you for convening this hearing. I am with SEIU. Our union has been a part of the Bordeaux long-term care facility for many years when it was attached to Nashville General Hospital in the last 6 years under Signature's management. With me today, and there's been a lot of talk about facts and figures, RFQs, state of the building, the state of the long-term care industry. There's been a couple references to employees. There's been some mention of patients. Joining me on the call is Alicia Halliburton. She's an employee, a certified nursing assistant at Bordeaux, and a union leader. And I was hoping that you would indulge us for Ms. Halliburton to tell you a little bit about her perspective as a caregiver there, and then for me to give just a little bit of overview from our organization's point of view, if that would be acceptable.
Yes, please. If we could be as brief, we still have council members on the committees that are in the queue.
Yes, sir. Alicia, can you go off mute?
Okay, I'm off. Hi, my name is Alicia Halliburton. I've been employed at Bordeaux for about 9 years. So I've seen the good and the bad side. I think it's important to keep the facility open because we have residents who have been here for 20, 25 years. And what we have to understand is change is not good for people that's been in this facility for a long time. My thing is, if you move them, how's the transition going to be for them? Is it going to be smooth? And sometimes when you have people that are used to one thing and you remove them, then some of them don't make it. You have fatalities. As they say, the COVID is out there. And the job is not that important to me. What's important to me is the residents have a safe place and people that care about them. You have residents that don't have families, and we are their family. We advocate for them. I watch residents leave the facility that has already been transferred to other facilities, and the look on their face bring tears to your eyes because they don't know what's happening. They don't know where they're going. They don't understand. But when they're here with us, they know us. We are familiar faces to them, and I want them to continue to stay, in this facility, in the community. You have families that aren't able to visit their families because they don't have transportation. They have the city buses here. If you take them and move them to another facility, maybe an hour away or 30 minutes, so how are their family going to see them? With the pandemic now that's going on, they do window visits, and that's all they have to look forward to. You take that away and put them in a strange place, they may not see their families anymore. I just hope that they reconsider, closing Bordeaux. And like I said, it'll be a lot of folks that lose their jobs, but we are more concerned about the residents and how it would affect them.
Thank you, Ms. Halliburton. Mr. Rayson.
So, Chair Taylor, if I could just follow up, I think Alicia really shows that Bordeaux is more than bricks and mortar. It's really, you can't question the dedication of the employees, and you can't question their commitment to the patients they serve. You know, I go out there often, and I would really encourage all of you to go there. So when I walk through that door, everybody I see is a caregiver. Not just the nurses, not just the nurses' assistants, the housekeepers, dietary staff, receptionists, laundry workers, they're all caregivers. I think about Rayetta Mitchell. Rayetta has been there 46 years. 46 years. More than some of us have been on this earth. Not me, but some people on this call. That's longer than they've been on this earth. And she has been in that facility 46 years. Now think about Sheila Counts. Sheila's a receptionist. When I go through that front door, almost every time there'll be a resident sitting there, lots of times in a wheelchair, sharing a cup of coffee with Miss Counts. She's providing care. I wish I had time to talk about all the stories out there and that we weren't having to do this virtually so you could see the workers face to face. But I do have, there's been a lot of statistics, but there's some I want to share too. Almost half of the workforce has been there over 10 years. 20 of them have been there 20 or more years. 3, in addition to Miss Mitchell, have been there over 40 years. Judy Lowe, a nursing assistant, cook Bobby Waters, laundry worker Mary Graves. For these folks, it's not just a job. It's a calling. It's been their life. You know, we talk about, well, maybe they'll find another job. But as Ms. Halliburton said, this is not just about a job. It's about caring for residents they know and have looked after for years. Now, they'll get a severance package, but a severance package is never a substitute for a good job, particularly in a time like now where we're facing a pandemic. You know, long-term care is a notoriously low-paid industry, but that's not the case at Bordeaux. Most workers there earn enough to support themselves and raise their families, and Metro's investment has helped make that possible. You know, to me, that's another example of where you, as the leaders of our city, have set an example about the kind of jobs we want to see in our community, particularly as in the workforce at Bordeaux, we have a majority Black workforce. Most of them are women. You know, we talk about a subsidy, and that's what
I want to move on. We have a few council members still in the queue. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I think this is just for me. We've worked. Last thing I'd say, Chair Taylor, please, is that we have worked with Dr. Webb at the hospital for many years. Our members respect him. We work with him day in and day out. We've seen great progress, and you've seen great progress at General Hospital. We think it's really important to explore with him the possibility of operating Bordeaux, and I think you'll see the same success. You know, we're willing to roll up our sleeves, and I know the workers are too. But thank you.
Councilmember Hall, briefly, and then I have Councilmember Benedict and Swarr still in the queue.
Well, I'll pick up where he ended, because throughout this, there's this common thread. I know this tendency to constantly try to advance Nashville General, right? So I've been having the conversation for 2 years with Nashville General. Ask Nashville General to release the feasibility study. This is about the contract ending in 2 years and them getting to that site because it's the only legitimate place Nashville General can go if the city's not going to come up with the money to keep them at the current site there is. So let's stop that. That is disingenuous as all get out. We're going to stop playing that game. Second part to that, additional revenue that it would cost to be subsidized to General, we've already said wasn't available, because if it's available, you could give it to somebody now as opposed to waiting for General to get licensed, to get an operator, and then give them the subsidy, and that's all after they do an assessment that others have already done. Moreover, they walked the property multiple times, hence how the feasibility study came about and was done to move Nashville General to that site. So I don't want to hear nothing else about that, because we've already established through multiple community meetings, District 1 don't want no part of anything Nashville General is talking about. I don't want to hear it again. If it comes up in any capacity again, it's going to get met with a fight. Second part to that, the conversation with the state to park those licenses is already taking place. The necessary board at the state has already been informed and had that conversation. Nobody's getting those licenses because nobody's going to play this game just like before when it was about getting the land to develop and not patient care. Now it's not going to be about bed licenses so people can get over there and make some money and not focus on care. We're trying to avoid the fact that there's been no real accountability on this meeting or prior to it, because every step of the way I keep hearing, oh, well, we know the climate was changing. Well, you knew the climate was changing and this is the only facility of its kind, yet you chose not to invest in it at any point. We've gotten more questions and answers on everything on this call, and let's end it very simply with this. If everybody agrees that we need to meet again, everybody should also write a letter saying to the committee that we want that $5 million in CARES Act to go over there and keep this place operating now. And we want a real strategic plan that should have been in place moving forward. We should seek out an interim or temporary emergency operator, and there are interested parties. So to Mr. Jameson's point, though, zero-sum investment, guys, yeah, this started with a council conversation. It should end with a council conversation. The council body should be the ones that determine whether or not this facility winds down, stays closed, or gets any other additional funding that is so sorely needed and has been begged for years. Check the votes, check the legislation, check the CIBs. We're not going to skip out on accountability, and we're not going to skip out on the fact that there's no plan in place for much of anything, it seems, right now.
Thank you, Councilman.
At the end of the day, we can do better. We should do better. The community and the public expects us to do better. So let's do better.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Benedict.
Thank you, Chair. And most of my colleagues have said most of what I want to say, but I want to call out that we're referencing, and respectfully, there's been some information. I really respect you, Mr. Jameson, but when I think about what was going on in 2014 with a booming economy and with low unemployment and with the desire to outsource things, that's what was happening then, and that is not what's happening now. We have had time. This pandemic has been going on for 7 months, but even beyond that, we continue to outsource things to for-profit organizations who are only interested in their bottom line. We are using taxpayer dollars to send executives to the country club on their membership on your dime. And we need to get out of the business of outsourcing things. I would much rather make sure our taxpayer dollars are going towards good paying jobs, good paying union jobs that invest back into the city, that allow workers to live in the city and make better contributions. Too often now we have seen that for-profit companies are always putting their profits ahead of people, whether that's Core Civic in the jail or with our charter schools. We need signature at the table, and the fact that they're not here for this call is unacceptable to me. That letter that the representative sent to you, Chair, that they are too busy and that they welcome written questions, why would they avoid a transparent public dialogue with the body that appropriates funds for them in exchange for, and we've asked them to take care of some of our most vulnerable residents. So we've covered almost all of that up to this point. I think it's critical that when we look at what we need from an administration that's running our city is that we need leadership, not management. We need somebody who will stick their neck out and say the right thing for Nashvillians is to manage this ourselves and make sure there's union jobs and to stop paying for-profit companies to come in and take jobs from Nashvillians. And we need to make sure that when we're talking about this subsidy, sure, $5 million of CARES Act money, like Councilmember Hall just said. What about earlier this year when we were talking about $1 million for a helicopter for the police? That's the type of reallocation of funding that when we talk about, I'm going to bring the police into this conversation, when we talk about reallocating funding from our police department, this is exactly one place where it could go. Those are the types of changes that are happening in the community, in society right now, not what happened in 2014. We need to look at this. The council should have been brought into this sooner. And whatever meeting there was on September 4th, show me where that invitation was and how it presented any sense of urgency to the council members. I just have not seen from this administration the leadership that the council needs and that the city needs. If we're making decisions to continue to outsource and find an operator that is not Metro government, then we are not committed to Nashvillians' welfare in the long term. We need a leader that will say Nashvillians should have good paying jobs. We should not be lining the pockets of executives. So with that, Chair, I appreciate us running long and that you let me take a few more minutes here. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close, I do have one last question. What would the procedure for emergency RFQ, and this is going back to Councilmember Toombs, if we were to extend to get through this health pandemic, this global health pandemic, what would be the procedure legally in the process that we could extend RFQ? We've heard that there's several different opportunity or options that council members have heard about, that council members have received firsthand. If that were to happen, is there a possibility to open a new RFQ for Bordeaux Hospital? And either Ms. Michelle Lane or Ms. Cross or the administration, not sure who could answer that the best, but.
I would defer to Michelle Lane on how long something like that would usually take, but there's very little time left between October 21st and when the wind down is supposed to be completed. If it was the council's will to contract with an emergency operator, it would be an emergency, and we might just skip the RFP to bring in somebody short term to do that if that's what the council chose.
Chairman Taylor, this is Michelle Lane.
Please, Ms. Lane.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, Mr. Cross is correct. I mean, if we have emergency conditions, the procurement code and the regulations allow for us to consider that emergency, and there are a variety of different explicit examples of emergency in the regulations, but we'd be able to consider that and identify a supplier and develop an emergency contract. If we were to, issue another solicitation, it would be on the behest of what we consider a proponent department. That would be, the lead agency kind of driving the solicitation process. And to the point, that is why we did see the previous solicitation on the street for 27 days, really working within the confines of the timeline that was established by the end of the current contract. So, it is absolutely, doable in the sense that you would probably need to have an emergency contract to allow for the period of time necessary if you were to issue another solicitation.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I have some notes to follow up on. As we mentioned, there were some parties that did not have a chance to join us tonight that the committees had several questions for. I will follow up with these parties to see if we can have a meeting called to discuss those questions and try to get some of those answers. Thank you again.
Chair, can I ask one question? I'm sorry to. Do we know how many employees work at this facility? I know somebody knows.
170 right now.
Employees?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So as we move forward, I will...
Chair, this is Birch. I hate to interrupt. And I caught your last emergency. The dynamics of this, I wouldn't... I don't know how I feel about an emergency due to everything that's been outlined. But with the workers, and this is going to be a question for General that doesn't have to be answered right now. It's just on my mind. Is there any way that General could absorb those workers?
Thank you, Councilman Berger. And
the same vein, how the Sheriff Department absorbed Core Civics employees.
Thank you. And again, I believe we don't have the parties in the room to answer that question at the moment. But we will. I will work on a follow-up conversation for the body. There were several questions that I feel that maybe didn't get answered in regards to us kind of missing some folks. But we will definitely have some follow-up. Thank you all again this evening. I'd like to close the meeting, and please just kind of keep your eyes and ears open for more conversation.
You're looking tired, Chair. You need to get some rest. You got a lot of years left in your term.
Thank you so much, Chair.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.